At dawn, they dragged him out, beaten, broken, and already forgotten. But the moment he touched his father's sword, it lit up in red. And soldiers started falling one by one. What happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. High Executor Brantley presided from an obsidian dais, his face sharp and pale beneath the blue light of the emblem star crest that loomed behind him. Every movement he made was measured, rehearsed, as though he'd already seen this performance play out 1,000 times. And maybe he had. Jason stood shackled in the center of the chamber, ringed by armored guards, and watched by a semicircle of delegates who never spoke, never blinked, only recorded. The judgment chamber of Caldera Prime's central citadel was meant to break men long before their sentence was delivered. Jason felt the weight of centuries of oppression pressing down on him like gravity itself had turned vindictive. He hadn't said a word since his arrest, not during the transport, not during the biometric scans, not even when they'd thrown the bloodied cloth at his feet, wrapped around the hilt of the only thing his father left him. Speaking wouldn't matter. Everyone here knew that. The verdict wasn't about evidence. It was about spectacle. His silence became the last act of control he had. "Jason Cole," Brantley said, voice echoing in the cold chamber. "Son of Dr. Evan Cole, convicted traitor to the Sovereign Code. You have inherited his blood, and with it, his crimes." His tone was devoid of anger, not even disdain, just a hollow finality, the voice of a bureaucrat performing extermination like it was janitorial work. "The blade you concealed violates Archive Mandate 47. Your refusal to report it is a direct violation of Security Edict 9. Possession alone by law demands termination." Jason's jaw clenched. Not out of fear, but shame. That sword had been nothing to him but a relic, an old curiosity buried in a freight crate beneath the floor panels. He'd never held it, never even looked too closely at it. His father had warned him once, "Don't let them know what you have, not even yourself." Now he understood. "The sentence," Brantley concluded, folding his hands like a man closing a book, "is public execution at dawn. The weapon will be incinerated under full military protocol. You are to be displayed as a reminder. Treason is hereditary." A praetor stepped forward, pushing Jason to his knees. His cheek hit the stone with a dull thud. Brantley was already gone, so were the delegates. And just like that, Jason Cole, citizen, nobody, worker, became an enemy of the Empire. Not for what he did, but for who he was. For blood, for silence, for a blade he never asked for. He lifted his head, blood trickling from his lip. He didn't know why, but in that moment he didn't feel fear. He felt rage. It was not the kind that screamed through nerves or tore muscle from bone. No, this pain was older, deep, marrow-etched, passed through generations like a curse. Jason Cole stood on the execution dais, wrists bruised from restraint, knees raw from stone. Above him, the sky of Citadel Omnia stretched wide and dead, veiled behind synthetic storm glass panels that filtered sunlight into a cold, sterile hue. Before him, thousands stood packed into the square, their faces drawn, eyes blank, mouths chanting the slogans fed to them since birth. Justice is mercy. Mercy is loyalty. Loyalty is life. The poor mouthed it like gospel. The elite didn't bother. Why recite what you authored? Surrounding him were towers carved from moon steel and ash brick, a skyline of obedient architecture meant to dwarf men and deify power. In every balcony, dignitaries lounged in safety behind force fields, sipping crimsonine while their children watched with morbid fascination. This wasn't punishment. This was theater. The sword rested in its case, an obsidian blade, long and silent, floating in a gravlock prism like an artifact from a forgotten mythology. It was the only piece of his father not erased by the regime. Jason's chest clenched at the sight of it, not out of sentiment, but from a profound unease. Something about it felt awake. A robed executor stepped forward, ceremonial in his cruelty, raising his hand for the final gesture. Then the voice came, male, calm, detached, like someone making an administrative request. "Let him die with dignity. Let him touch his father's blade before he bleeds." Laughter rippled from the balconies, dry and condescending. The guards obeyed. The prism dissolved, and 2 pairs of gloved hands forced Jason's fingers around the hilt. The pain changed. His lungs caught. His vision narrowed. And then opened. The sword burned, not with heat, but with memory. Thoughts that weren't his own crashed through his mind like solar storms. He saw empires rise and fall, battles fought beneath blood-red suns, thrones forged in the hearts of stars. Names came to him: kings, queens, rebels, monsters. And at the center of it all, the blade. A weapon bound not to bloodline, but to will. His father's voice echoed through the noise, not from memory, but from the sword itself. The sword chooses the emperor. Jason's body moved on instinct, driven by something larger than survival. The blade sang. Steel met flesh. The first guard fell, armor split like paper. The second didn't even scream. Panic rippled through the crowd like a virus, sudden and irreversible. Screams rose, not in celebration of justice, but in terror of its undoing. Praetors lunged. Jason met them. The sword guided his strikes, not wild, not savage, but purposeful, ancient, sovereign. He did not run. He did not plea. He stood his ground, blade dripping with the blood of tyrants. Because in that moment, Jason Cole understood something that seared through every assumption he'd ever lived by. He had never been the criminal. The world had simply outlawed the truth, but not the clean, triumphant kind taught in state-approved history reels. This was the raw, bitter strain born of starvation and silence, of nights spent hiding under broken ceilings while stormtroopers marched above. In the undercity beneath Omnia, hope had always come at a cost, usually in blood, more often in betrayal. But when Jason Cole staggered through the vent shafts and drainage canals, filthy and bleeding, clutching a sword glowing with the pulse of forgotten kings, the city stirred. Word spread like gas fire. The waste boy lives. The sword sings again. A sovereign walks among rust and ash. The slums responded first, not with banners or chants, but with eyes. From window cracks and sewage vents, from cargo bins turned into homes, faces emerged, half-starved and rimmed with suspicion. Children pointed. Old men wept. Jason moved like a ghost through the ruins of civilization's forgotten floor, chased not by soldiers but by belief. New, tentative, impossible belief. That's when the Reclaimers found him. Cassandra Lee was not what Jason expected from a rebel leader. Tall, lean, face hard as rebar, her left eye replaced by a cracked lens that buzzed when she turned too quickly. She didn't posture. She didn't kneel. She studied him like a broken machine, deciding whether he could still be repurposed. "You don't look like an emperor," she said, arms crossed. "I'm not," Jason replied, voice raw from smoke and silence. She stepped closer. "But the sword disagrees." The resistance didn't crown him. They watched him. They tested him, gave him tools, not orders. They didn't need messiahs. They needed momentum. In the flickering dark of reclaimed subtunnels and bioreactor shells, Jason pored over records stitched from lost fragments, secret transmissions, erased history, journals of vanished rulers who once held the blade and disappeared when the executors rewrote the future. Jason's blood was not royalty, it was rebellion in its purest form. His father hadn't hidden the sword out of shame, but to keep it from falling into hands that would silence it forever. The blade wasn't just a relic. It was a beacon, a key, a memory forged into metal, and the people responded. Smelting yards shut down overnight. Drone pylons were hacked and reprogrammed to broadcast forbidden frequencies. Even off-world miners began refusing shipments. Each whisper, each act of defiance, linked back to one image now burned into the minds of the underclass. A man with no armor, no title, no legacy, only a sword that chose him. Jason never gave speeches, he didn't preach. But when he walked, they followed. Not because he led, because he meant something the Empire could not control. But it did not come in the form of banners unfurling or trumpets blaring into the void. It came in the low, thunderous rhythm of a million boots against marble. It came in the smoke curling from shattered watchtowers, the silence of once impervious force fields now fried to useless circuitry. It came in the voices of miners from the asteroid belts, in the chants of children from planetary slums, in the roars of engineers and farmers who had never held rifles but now marched with purpose. The Empire did not fall to war. It fell to reckoning. Omnia burned not because it was attacked, but because it had forgotten what it meant to serve the people it claimed to rule. Jason stood at the front, no rank insignia on his chest, no ceremonial robe across his shoulders, just dust-streaked armor and the blade. Always the blade. The sword did not shine in the light. It devoured it, casting long shadows with every arc, every strike. It didn't just cut through metal or bone. It severed fear itself. Cassandra fell at the spire gate. A single sniper round, clean, precise, cowardly, punched through her chest as she shoved Jason from its path. She smiled as she collapsed, not because she welcomed death, but because she believed she'd bought enough time. Her final breath didn't beg or tremble. Don't stop now. Make it worth it. Jason didn't weep. He didn't falter. He roared. The final charge was not elegant. It was brutal. The throne hall, once a sanctum of polished silence, became a crucible of fire and resolve. High Executor Brantley stood atop the dais in gold-etched armor, flanked by guards who had never lost a battle, until that day. "You think a sword makes you an emperor?" he spat, contempt curling his lip. Jason stepped forward, blade humming with history. "No," he said, "but the truth does." The fight was not fair. It wasn't meant to be. It was justice unshackled. By the end, Brantley's body lay in pieces at the foot of the cracked throne. The symbol of tyrannical continuity split clean down its spine. Jason didn't claim it. He destroyed it, melted its alloy, poured it into a mold that would become the base of the new council chamber. Power would no longer sit on a pedestal. It would stand among the people. He refused titles, refused crowns, refused the myth they tried to build around him. But myths have lives of their own. They called him the last emperor, not because he ruled, but because he chose not to. And when his voice echoed across the stars, carried by stolen satellites and rebel transmitters, it did not command. It invited. "I didn't rise to rule. I rose because no one else could. If you remember anything, remember this. We are not chosen by birth. We are chosen by the moment we say no more." The sword slept again, but the fire it lit did not.